Hello and welcome to Bibliophile series. In this series, we go through articles and analyze them, understand them, how to read them, how to identify argumentation. This episode will have the article CBSE board results out. Why I won't celebrate the toppers, written by Abhijit Pathak. He's a professor at JNU and a regular contributor to several news dailies in India. Let's go to the article. The results of CBSE Class 12 exams are here. And once again, a group of achievers, I'm sure, will emerge as instant stars. Now see, this way of speaking, when you can see the person and they make air quotes, you understand that they are speaking with a little bit of sarcasm in their voice. Even when it is written, when you have unnecessary uh, unnecessary apostrophes being used or putting extra emphasis on words, that is sarcasm. Basically, the author is saying X, but what he actually means is Y. So the result of class 12 CBSE results are here, and once again, a group of achievers will emerge as instant stars. Their miraculous performance, if you read it in that tone, you'll understand what the author is trying to say. Their miraculous performance in, say, physics, mathematics, chemistry, and biology will be talked about and widely circulated through social media. Yet, these success stories do not fascinate me. Instead, I'm worried that a hyper-competitive and exam-centric education is normalized and allowed to negate the very spirit of libertarian education. I'm guessing a lot of us would not be familiar with the idea of libertarian education, but you can perhaps draw contextual meaning of it. Libertarian education points to a system of education in which the participants themselves decide how much they want to access that education and at what rate. Instead of making a framework in which everyone is going through the motions, doing the same thing over and over again in a manner that is mechanized, you allow people to explore their interests, you allow people to cover portions at their own pace in the fields of their interest. That is the very spirit of libertarian education. And ideally, in an ideal world, the education system should be trying to get to a point where every individual is not going through a system, every individual is maximizing his or her potential. Okay, so the author is opposed to the idea, slightly opposed to the idea of putting these people who score very highly in class 12 at a pedestal. And it is not the people that he has a problem with. The problem that he has is with the system. Understand, very often they mistake the beneficiary of a system as the villains, whereas the system in itself is problematic. What he is referring to is the fact that the system is problematic. Participants of the system, you have no choice. You will go through the motions anyway. But the system in itself is problematic. That is what the author is going for, because it is hyper competitive and exam centric in nature. And this has become the norm. When we say it is being normalized, it is stated that it has become the norm, it has become the accepted way of doing things. And it negates the very target of education, or at least the stated target of education, which says we want individuals to reach their full potential. That would come under the spirit of libertarian education system. But what we do have right now is nowhere close to it. Now, the next slide. In this context, let me raise three issues. This is a very good writing style, very good speaking style, even if you were giving a speech. When we were debating, we were taught this as well. In order to ensure that the people who are reading follow along with whatever you're speaking or whatever you're trying to form them of, announce how many sections there are going to be, what those sections are going to be, so that people know distinctly when you have shifted your idea. So in this context, let me raise three issues. The author has now given a framework. There are three issues that he's going to talk of, which address the concerns that he has raised about the hyper-competitive nature of education and how exam-centric education has become. First, here is a system of education that has been corrupted by an unholy alliance of regimented schools and utilitarian coaching centers. He has a problem with schools and coaching centers being the primary drivers of education in the country. As tests and exams have acquired more importance than a creatively nuanced critical pedagogy. Pedagogy is the style of teaching. So we are not looking for nuance. Nuanced is focusing on small little details that give you additional insight into something. Creatively nuanced critical pedagogy would mean the ability to think critically, the ability to look at stuff and then understand. That has been put to the side. What has taken precedence is tests and exams. The joy of learning seems to have disappeared from the classroom. In simpler words, what he's saying is, instead of being amazed by wonderful new pieces of information that you get exposed to in the classroom, the process has been replaced with, okay, you learn this because this is what will come in the exam. This is also, if I could draw a parallel, this is also one of the reasons why certain people, despite being proficient in English, don't do well in Nazis, because for them, reading about something, reading about article, reading a new passage does not really give them happiness. When you don't positively engage with the material, the likelihood of you being able to comprehend it, the likelihood of you being able to understand what the passage is trying to get through to you reduces significantly. Learn to enjoy reading. Then RCs, not that it will be a direct one-to-one relationship, but it will become easier to understand English over an extended period of time. Okay. Ask any good pedagogue or educator, and you will likely be told that a young student needs to have a reasonably relaxed and dialogic space to reflect on science and poetry or history and mathematics. Okay. Ask any good pedagogue or educator. Remember, he has qualified it with good pedagogue or educator. So you will likely be told that young student needs to have reasonably relaxed and dialogic space to reflect on science and poetry. When you there is if you go into the theory of education of how to teach and what to do and everything, there are two extreme schools of thought. One is let's challenge the students at every step of the way, and anytime they live up to the challenge, you reward them, give them positive reinforcement. Then the other school of thought is let us encourage them in every endeavor that they have, even if they are making mistakes. Let us encourage them. This is I'm talking more about school level classes, KG, LKG, prep, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those systems. And by the time people reach class 5, class 6, they're still kids. Yet they would be in a position to know what sort of motivation mechanism works for them. And but what the author is getting at is, instead of having the time to reflect upon the material that is provided to them and their interaction and interconnectedness, people are only interested, okay, this is the portion that is important in exams. For instance, this happens very commonly in my quant classes. If I were to ask people to find out a number of factors of a number, very often they are able to do it instantly because that is very, very easy to do once you know the process, once you know the formula. But then if I ask them define factors, then it turns into a very difficult process for them. And the lack of being able to define what factors are and what multiples are, HCF is, what LCM is, it may seem like an unimportant thing to you right now, but if at all you ever come to my class and have conversations, we tell you why language-based understanding of all mathematical concepts is important, especially if you ever get to every stage of any. Okay, so the ability to absorb material at a relaxed pace and look at the linkages between them. Say, Lewis Carroll, the author for Alice in Wonderland, was a mathematician. And within the book, Alice in Wonderland, there are lots of mathematical concepts that he has thought of, that he has referenced. The primary among them that I am aware of is counting in a different base. But if you only look at Alice in Wonderland is a kid's book, how does it help us in learning maths? If you start off by separating the two ideas in entirety, becomes a problem. or something very simple. Let's say the last article we talked of synergies. Talked of synergies. The concept of synergy is best explained by a plus b whole square, because a square plus b square is always lower than a plus b whole square. That is the concept of synergy. Two things combine and then they're squared. You would see the outcome that you get is going to be larger than the outcome that you had when you had a square and b square alone. So language has its roots in mathematics. Mathematics has its roots in language. Lots of things are connected. And the example that the author here is giving is science or poetry or history and mathematics, so on and so forth. Let's say even language and history, of course, there the connection is easier to see. Decimate, I'll give you a task. Go and search the historical evolution of the word decimate, and then you'll understand why history and language are so intricately linked together. Anyway, so the author is saying a good pedagogue would tell you the student should have the ability and time and peace of mind to connect seemingly unconnected ideas and then creatively link them in order to develop understanding. But then, when the system transforms you into a restless warrior continually running after success in an endless series of highly problematic and mechanized exams, weekly tests, monthly tests, mathematics Olympiad, board exams, and much hyped standardized tests like IIT, JEE, NEET, and CET, is there any joy of learning? Again, given that we are preparing for CAT, you can perhaps link it. We can perhaps link it. We are preparing for a highly mechanized exam to the extent that it requires you to think in slightly unconventional ways. It is good. But then CAT, for every person preparing for CAT, hopefully you'll realize don't have to be excelling at CAT in order to be a good business manager. So while this is the best alternative available, it is not really a best measure of somebody's managerial potential. You would agree. But then we come back to one of the earlier ideas I mentioned. While we may disagree with CAT being a good indicator of your managerial potential, if them's the rules, that's how we play. We cannot really change anything. We are part of the system. We are part of the rat race. So we are part of the rat race. Until we get to a point where we can perhaps moderate the system, we are simply looking to survive, and thereby we cannot really go against the grain. But the point is well received, at least at my end, wherein simply trying to excel in standardized exams should not be the objective of learning. The objective of learning should be exposing new ideas to you, making you wonder how many things and wondrous ideas have been discovered prior to you getting to them. I'm sure, to draw an example, when people are little and for the first time they are learning about tables, when you get to the table of 9, you see the unit digits are 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When you look at the tens digits, they are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Every child, when they are learning tables, or at least most children, they are filled with wonder. Oh, I have discovered a new way of learning the tables of 9. But then, at later points, when we are exposed to something wondrous, let's say how to find out square or how to find out cubes of certain numbers, then we think, okay, this is how we do it in exam. The absolute engagement with the subject matter, the absolute engagement with, oh, how this wonderful thing is happening, that is gone forever, which hinders our ability to engage with the material and, of course, absorb it appropriately. Okay. My own personal opinion on the issue side. But then, when the system transforms you into a restless warrior, continually running after success in an endless series of highly problematic and mechanized exams, weekly tests, monthly tests, mathematics Olympiad, board exams, and the much hyped standardized tests like IIT, JEE, NEET, and CET, is there any joy of learning? Simply, the joy of learning has been sapped away. What we have is repeated execution of tests, tests, and more tests. Or is there any creative surplus needed for deep inquiry and exploration? Instead, the system tends to kill the creativity of the, because you're going through the process so many times over and over, and the way to succeed is simply to excel in exams. You being able to ask insightful questions in class is not really the target for you to be able to succeed in exams. That is how things work. It tends to kill the creativity, and people, if there is a box, you are expected not to cross the boundaries. You are expected to stay within the box, stay within the confines of what the discussion is. Then it becomes difficult to really extend the boundaries of what is possible and what can be done. Hence, even if a topper manages to get 499 by 500 in the board exam, it does not necessarily mean that he or she has celebrated and internalized, say, a poem by Pablo Neruda. Pablo Neruda is most likely an author, in this instance, a poet. The only reference I know of Pablo Neruda is there is a TV show, there was a TV show by the name of How I Met Your Mother, where the central character was Ted Mosby, and his favorite poet was Pablo Neruda. Beyond that, I don't know who or what he is, but Pablo Neruda. Okay? So the kid has not really internalized a poem by Pablo Neruda. An innovative experiment in physics lab, or for that matter, an episode from Mahatma Gandhi's The Story of My Experiments with Truth. Education is deeply qualitative experience. The author, see, what we are living through right now is an education system in which your performance is judged in quantitative terms, how you perform in tests. The author is making the argument the opposite is true. Education is a deeply qualitative experience. You cannot really quantify it in numbers. However, the neurotic obsession with quantification of what is essentially qualitative seems to have killed the joy of learning. No wonder our toppers, again, too, function like machines. From schools to coaching centers, or from early morning to late night, they are continually running like a horse. They don't really have time to explore or pursue hobbies. They're simply going through the motion repeatedly until they hit a breaking point. Now here, understand that it is fine to criticize the system. It's fine to criticize the system. Do not blame the individuals. The individual is simply a part of the system. They cannot change the system. So the topper here is not at fault. The author is being very specific in mentioning it is the system that is problematic, not the individual. Hate the game, not the player. Okay. The next part of the article. See, the first part of the article is the joy of learning has gone away. We have schools teaching you for the exam. We have coaching centers teaching you for the exam. You are preparing for the exam, for the test, repeatedly going through the motions. The joy of learning, the wonder, the sense of wonder that you experience when you come across something new, all of that has gone away. Instead, we are focusing solely on exams. Education is supposed to be a qualitative experience. However, the quantification of the entire process by way of test, exams, has taken the joy out of the process. Now remember, he had stated three potential problems or three points that he wanted to speak about the issue. First point was joy is taken away. Second, let us be honest enough to accept that minds of most of these achievers or toppers have already been programmed. Ask them, what is your aim in life? Quite likely, most of them will give you a market-driven standardized answer. I wish to become a computer engineer or a doctor or an IAS officer. Seldom do you find a topper surprising you by saying that he wants to become a filmmaker like Ritvik Bhatta. I don't know who this is, but I'm guessing he is definitely noteworthy that the author knows. A social activist like Megha Patkar. Again, I know the name, but I don't really know too much about her. I am a product of the system, and my lack of information is shining through. A historian like Romila Thapar, or a scientist like C.V. Raman. Possibly, this homogenization of aspirations among toppers indicates how a system is manufacturing a bunch of conformists. How, instead of creating leaders and instead of creating creative people who are unique in their own way. We are creating people who follow the beaten path to the letter, and we are creating the system is manufacturing a bunch of conformists. People who have similar aspiration, either I'll be a doctor, I'll be an engineer, I'll be an IAS officer, something along those lines. Uh, if the education fails to ignite the mind of the young, what do you do with a mark sheet like this? Physics 99 out of 100, mathematics 100 out of 100, chemistry 98 out of 100, biology 97 out of 100, English 99 out of 100. So this person has 1, 1, 3, 2, 7 marks deducted out of 500, 493 by 500. So 98.6%, 98.6%. And given our personal state right now, for most of us, given our academic records are not that great, if we had something like this, we'd be extremely happy because this would enhance our chances at getting into a prestigious school that we want to get into. But understand the point that the author is making. If the creative juices are not playing, if you are simply looking to become, if your aspirations are very much conforming with the standard responses, you want to be a doctor, you want to be an engineer, you want to be an IAS officer, then regardless of the result that you obtained in the exam, it's not like you are making a difference. You're staying in the lane, you're doing the same things that everyone else is doing, you're becoming a conformist. Okay. Third, I'm not very sure whether we are capable of understanding those whose performances in board exam are not so satisfactory. The first point was joy of exam has been taken away. Second point was homogenization of aspirations. And now the third point, I'm not very sure whether we are capable of understanding those whose performances in the board exams are not so satisfactory. In fact, in this age of inflated marks, he also has a problem with inflated marks. And this is something I absolutely find very, very weird. Back in my day, somebody got 90, it meant something, person has put in effort. Now, every random person that I talk to has 90%. And it's not like people have become collectively smarter. It is more that there have been there has been a dedicated push at more liberal marking. Let's give more and more people more and more marks. Back in my day, in your board exam, you could not possibly score 100 in any language subject because scoring 100 in a language subject meant there was a grammar or a language section of the paper. The language section of the paper, you had to write an essay, you had to write letters. When you give, let's say, 100% marks on an essay, essentially what you're saying is a better essay cannot be written. This is the best essay that can be framed. That was, that is, of course, impossible. A better essay can always be written. Language is not confined by rules of this and that. But with passage of time, people are getting 100 in English, people are getting 100 in Hindi. This is amazingly surprising for us. But then again, the individuals are not bad. It is the system that has become more attuned to mollycoddling people and giving them more and more marks. Additionally, I don't think the author has mentioned this. My own personal problem with board exam marking schemes is there is a certain bias for location in schools also. I don't think if that has happened with you, but let's say you come from a prestigious school, and you come from a non-prestigious school. This continued when you were in college. The highest marks given, if you knew that that you have received, comes from a non-prestigious school, non-high-profile school. Then the average marks that are given to those sets of candidates versus, let's say, somebody's very marks, the answer sheets that you have are from a very prestigious school. The mark sheets differ drastically when it comes to average score or distribution of score. But then that is not something the author has mentioned. That is something I have observed. It's not. In fact, in this age of inflated marks, you begin to see yourself as a failure even if you get 90%. Comparatively, yes. Think of it this way. Poverty, there are two types of poverty. One is absolute poverty, where you are below the poverty line as defined within your country. And then there is relative poverty. Relative poverty is the people around you are earning more. You are also earning quite a lot, but people around you are earning more and then thereby you feel poor. That is relative poverty. Similarly, this is not really failure when you score 90%, but it is relative failure when you see people around you. The average score for everyone is 95%, 96%. The worst outcome of this, and this is more to do with my own undergraduation college. Back in my day, when we went to apply to colleges, at the application window, at that time, individual colleges had different applications. You did not have a centralized application mechanism as you have today. Or now there is an exam, CUET, entire exam gets conducted. I'm not really familiar with the undergrad now, but back in my day, you had to apply to submit. So at the SRCC application collection window, all people who scored above 92% went in one pile. People who scored below 92% went in the other pile because they knew the cutoff will be higher than 92. Now, up until the last time that I had checked or I had talked to people in my college, the piles had been separated into 97 plus and 97 and below. How are you getting? And every batch now has roughly 1,000 kids. 1,000 kids above 97% is insane. And it's not like 97 is the cut. 97.25 was also the cutoff. 97.5 was also the cutoff. So insane liberal marking was happening. And with that insane liberal marking, think of somebody who got 90. Now, previously, if you got 90, you could get into not perhaps SRCC, but you could get into Hansraj or a Hindu or a Ramjas or a Khalsa. These are all North campus colleges, extremely well-known good colleges. But now at 90, you would be lucky to find even the non-prestigious colleges within the U4, and specifically referring to the B.Com honors course, because the marks have become so liberalized. People are getting not liberalized, as in marking has become so liberal that everyone gets a very high score. Thereby, cutoffs are increasing year on year, which is why when the cutoffs were increasing year on year, they had to change the system in order to accommodate other boards because CBSE had become very liberal in order to accommodate other boards and put students across the country at a liberal at a equal footing. They had to come up with the entrance exam concept. Anyway, uh, you begin to feel like a failure even if you get 90%. Sad state of affairs. The impact on kids who don't do too well, despite scoring 90%, they feel like a failure. And then because exams are highlighted as the most important thing, if you don't do well in that exam, it seems like you have become you have failed at the task that you were supposed to do. Even if you have a good grasp of certain concept, you have a good grasp of certain ideas, you feel like a failure because the marks are not. Not that you have a lack of understanding, but because your marks are not there, you feel like a failure. Social Darwinism is normalized. Darwinism is survival of the fittest. Darwinism, the Darwinian concept is survival of the fittest. As social Darwinism is normalized and success stories are celebrated everywhere, it is quite likely that those who fail will be compelled to live with shame and guilt. Basically, anytime hero worship happens, you need to have a villain. You need to have, if something good exists, something bad will also exist. So when you have all the posters, when you have all the posters celebrating the toppers, everyone who is not a topper, who is not on that poster, will feel bad. These days, many middle class parents love to see their children as commodities with appropriate placements and salary packages. They too would feel ashamed if their children fail to acquire the winning strategy. This is a brilliant idea. This is a brilliant idea put forth this way. Uh, I think how do you, the system is flawed, agreed. But then, right now, in the last line, when you say the middle class parents love to see their children as commodities, you are allocating blame upon the middle class parents that they are looking at their children as commodities, which is not really true. While they would be happy if their child did well for themselves, if they can ensure that their child did well for themselves without the necessity of excelling in exams, they'll perhaps choose that. Then the path for the path of most likely success goes through excelling in exams, and that is what parents want for their kids. It is not like the parents are looking to most middle class parents want the best for their kids, not necessarily because the children are commodities or the placement packages and the salaries that they would get would be better for them. It is mainly because they want the best for their children, and the best in the current market scenario is defined as doing well in the exams. Okay, and they would not feel ashamed if their children failed to acquire the winning strategy. They would be worried that the child would not be successful later on in life. Okay, but then the author has laid the blame at the feet of the parents, which I don't really agree with, but that is what he stated. Okay, this is violence that manifests itself in the form of mental agony and even suicidal tendencies among those who fail to win this rat race. Okay? It is high time we begin to rethink the purpose of education. Possibly, the fundamental objective of libertarian education is to encourage the learner to know and unfold his or her unique traits and aptitudes. Basically, maximize your potential as an individual and find joy and meaning in the domain of work. However, when schools fail to see anything beyond the official curriculum, basically, we teach you according to the textbook so that you do well in the exams, and that is how work success is defined. And want only standardized, market-friendly, and disciplined products. When we say disciplined products, what they're referring to is conformist kids. Many creative minds begin to see themselves as outsiders. Possibly, some of the students who have not done well in the board exams have immense potential in the domain schools are not interested in, say in creative art. However, a one-dimensional or a bureaucratized or a dehumanized pattern of schooling destroys many young minds and kills many flowers. So, as in basically, the kids who don't do well in the exams are touted as having not succeeded, despite them having different forms of intelligence. They could be creative, they could be very good at speaking, they could be very good at drawing, painting. But then, because those areas are not getting tested, what is getting tested is physics, chemistry, maths, and not even in physics, chemistry, maths, some revolutionary idea being tested. It is to the textbook, it is for acing the exam that people are studying. If you're not good at exam taking, that does not necessarily translate into you are not intelligent. You could have intelligence that is not getting tested. Yet, because success and failure is defined in terms of your examination outcomes, it will lead to agony and heartbreak and pain for those who are being dubbed as failures, and even suicidal tendencies have been referenced. So, if we have to, let's say, round the entire article up, I'd say the first thing was loss of first paragraph was the author stating his position is not going to celebrate toppers because this is simply normalizing normalizing something. I don't remember the precise term, but normalizing exam proficiency over necessarily education. The first point that he spoke of, the first point that he spoke of was schools and schools and coaching centers have taken away the joy of learning, and they are focused more on simply getting the kid to clear the exam. When you take away the joy of learning, then the likelihood of the kid being able to understand the material that they are supposed to be going through and have supposedly mastered, that becomes very minimal. The second point that the author raises is these kids have been programmed, they are conformists. For them, achievement in life means something very unique. And then other domains will not possibly get toppers who are interested in it. When we say other domains, he gave examples of lots of people. There was Ritvik, some fellow. Then there was Medha Patkar. Then there was a historian. And then there was scientist called C.V. Raman. So I'm not looking at the article right now. Again, to highlight, I am myself a part of the system. Myself a part of the system, both as a student and as a, let's say, coaching institute person, that we are looking to maximize your score in the exam. Then understand it comes from a place not necessarily in agreement with the current system. It is because the system is the system. We cannot really turn the system by believing the opposite. The third point that the author raises is the fact that when you celebrate the achievers, you also have supposed failures. And because the marking scheme has become so liberal, even people at 90% will feel like failures. And these supposed failures could potentially be intelligent in other areas that are not getting tested, which is also a sad outcome. We should potentially have testing for all sorts of, not necessarily testing for all sorts of things. Intelligence cannot be quantified. One wonderful line that the author mentioned was, uh, education is a very qualitative experience, but our obsession with quantifying everything takes away the joy of learning. And in between, there was an argument made by the author. The parents are looking at children as commodities, and they want their kids to crack the success formula. I think this was a step too far. In in all other portions, he's not blaming the students; he's blaming the system. But when it came to parents, he has allocated the blame to the individuals instead of blaming the system. I don't really like it, but okay. That is all the understanding that I have for this article. If I had to, let's say, criticize the article or say there's something wrong with it, whenever you write an article, and this is especially true when you're writing bad somewhere, hopefully we get to the subsequent rounds. Whenever you identify a problem or you point out, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, a very good way of writing is always proposing an alternative solution. The author is a part of the education system, he's a professor. He has not really proposed an alternative system by which the problems that he's mentioning can be overcome. He's simply saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. He has never really provided an alternate solution. And the areas that he's talking of, let's say creative areas or other stuff, understand because creative areas are not amenable to quantification. That is the reason why they are not being included in testing. Understand? A lot of time testing happens not because testing is the best way, but testing is the best available way. Let's say for our particular purpose, it's not like these schools believe that if you scored lower in 10th or 12th, if you scored lower in 10th or 12th, you are an absolutely, you have absolutely poor potential as managers. But what they do believe is, see, it is more likely that a person with a good 10th, 12th score, is more likely that a person with good 10th, 12th graduation score is going to be academically inclined because we want academically inclined people on our campus. These academically inclined people have shown that they are sincere, they put in the effort compared to other people. So that is why your past academic record is factored in at the time of your admission. Now, the counter argument is, of course, that means if you ever made a mistake, let's say in 10th, you had some reason for not doing well in your 10th board exams, and that is coming back to bite you in your entrance tests, in your chances for getting admission right now. Yes, that is a loss that is happening. But understand, when you frame systems, you don't frame systems for exceptions. You frame systems for majority of the population. Majority of the population cannot come up and say that I particularly had a bad 10th exam because, let's say, there was a death in the family, or because on the day that I was going to the exam center, my tire burst and then I reached the exam center, let's say, 1 hour late when it was a 2 hour paper. Majority of the population can't say that. For those exceptional things, you cannot really create a system. Whenever you create a system for handling majority of the situation. Majority of the people would have reached the exam center appropriately. And then when everyone has scored whatever they have scored, among those, they prefer the cream of the crop because they are more likely to be nice. Understand, just because you have good 10 score or a good 12 score does not translate into admission. It does not translate into, just because you have a good academic score, academic background, it translates into, okay, you will necessarily get admission if you have an interview. That is not that does not happen. A lot of people with great academic record, great CAT score, get rejected from interviews simply because they felt that what they had done in the past was enough to push through to the next round. And this is a discussion for, let's say, interview stages at a later point of time. Right now, simply understand, I had started off by saying the criticism of the article. The author has not provided any alternative solution, then has, of course, has unnecessarily blamed the parents in part, and understand marks are being used as judgment parameters for people. He has not acknowledged that marks are being used as judgment parameters for people because there is no better alternative available. Let's say if you have B school admissions in India, if you have B school admissions based on application, if you remove the application rating score component, if you remove the prior ACADS component or WorkX component and everything, understand there are last year, roughly 2.88 lakh people appeared for CAT. Of those 2.88 lakh people, even if I take conservative estimate, around 2.5 lakh people would want to apply to Ahmedabad. If the process was everyone who applies to Ahmedabad will go through their SOP, will interview everyone. Hopefully you understand the B school will not have time to do any work apart from only taking admissions throughout the year. Then that is, so they're not really selecting people based on their past academic record. They are filtering people based on their past academic record. Now, among the filtered crowd, they're looking for people with the best managerial potential. Okay. Now, additionally, this article had two new ideas that you should ideally go back and read upon. First is libertarian education system, and the second is social Darwinism. Both of these would be good subsequent ideas for you to read upon. That is all for article analysis. The statistical analysis, the article length was 591 words. The number of sentences was 22. The flesh Kincaid grade level was 12.91. So the reading level was not very high. 12th class students should be able to understand this text. And the flesh reading E score was approximately 50. So it falls in the fairly difficult to read category. But understand, when we say fairly difficult to read category, it is across all texts. So when you have books like not Chandan, Champak and Nandan and Suman Saurabh and those Tinkle articles and Dr. Seuss books and basic kiddie books, those books would be closer to 100. This is somewhere in the middle. This is a moderate article. This is a moderate article. There is not a lot of high-level words were used. It was fairly easy to understand and read. I see fairly easy to understand and read. By CAT standards, this is a fairly straightforward passage. That will be all for this week's analysis. Hopefully you learned something.